Hi, my name is Margaret Frisbee, and I'm the Executive Director of Friends of the Chicago River. And I want to welcome you this evening to the 100th anniversary celebration of the opening of the DuSable Bridge. We're thrilled to have you here this evening and have put together a 30-minute program that we hope you'll find interesting and exciting. We've invited all kinds of musicians and historians who will tell the story of the bridge and how it impacted Chicago. Our host this evening is Josh Coles, the director of Friends McCormick Bridge House and Chicago River Museum. But I'm delighted to start the program by introducing Chicago's Mayor, Lori Lightfoot, to say a few words. Thank you, Mayor.
Hello, I'm Mayor Lori Lightfoot. 100 years ago, in the wake of the Spanish flu, Chicago opened the DuSable Bridge on Michigan Avenue. This transformed a single dirt lane road into the magnificent mile at the heart of our downtown and connected the south and north sides of the city. Even in the most difficult of times, we can build, transform, and strengthen. Time and again, I said that our city is resilient. And the DuSable Bridge is just one of many iconic symbols displaying our resiliency. We have a lot to look forward to in the next 100 years. But for now, please continue to stay home and save lives. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Josh Coles. I'm the director of the McCormick Bridge House and Chicago River Museum, which is a program of Friends of the Chicago River. I'm also very excited because I'm your host for this evening, where we will have a great lineup of speakers and guests who will all celebrate this momentous occasion. Another thing that we're going to be doing tonight is playing trivia. So before each segment, I'm going to ask a question. You'll have the entire time to think about it. Then afterwards, I'll pop back up and answer that for you. With that, your first question is, in what year was the Michigan Avenue Bridge renamed the DuSable Bridge, and who was Jean-Baptiste Point DuSable? So to start us off, we'll hear that very special story from May 14th, 1920, from Chicago's cultural historian, Tim Samuelson.
I'm Tim Samuelson, and I'm the city's cultural historian. So I'm kind of the municipal go-to guy with stories of Chicago history and ephemera, and it's a great gig. That bridge was a long time coming. People talked about trying to relieve the bottleneck that was at that location because of the old inadequate Rush Street Bridge that was very close. And also in terms of the idea of putting that bridge through that would give a whole new life to the north side of Chicago. In fact, if you look at old descriptions of it, they often referred to it not as the Michigan Avenue Bridge, but the Boulevard Link, that North Michigan Avenue would be transformed to what was lots of warehouses and pretty utilitarian buildings, and make it into this elegant boulevard that would be comparable to the great shopping promenades of Paris and European centers. But the opening of the bridge, to get back to that, this was an entertainment that only Mayor William Hale Thompson could orchestrate. He was certainly a mayor like we've never had before or since. And he was somebody of bravado and big gesture and populist notions and all kinds of public speeches that get people all fired up. And some of the things he would propose and say, people would go, what? But here was his chance to shine, the opening of this long delayed bridge. Now, I can't even tell you why they chose to open it the day that they did, the date that we're celebrating here, because the bridge wasn't finished. So the bridge towers were just simple wood structures that could hold the machinery to raise the bridges up and down. Even at the time of the dedication, with all the fancy pomp and the activities, there were workmen building part of the lower level at the same time. So Thompson cuts the ribbon, goes across, jumps in his car, goes across. Now starts the procession of floats. The floats were decked out. They got women dressed in beautiful outfits. The crowds were coming along. The decorated cars were coming along. Marching bands were coming along. bells were ringing, whistles were tooting, they had boats underneath. People said it was a really noisy event. And there's even stories of how, well, when they put fresh tar in just before the event, that turned out to be a bit of a problem for some because the tar was really sticky. And there is a story, I think particularly of a marching band that went across, and they start to, you all have to keep in time and keep moving. Some of their boots got stuck in the tar, and there are cases of where some of the marchers had to basically get themselves free of their boots, leaving their boots stuck in the tar. But then it was time to show the bridge in operation as part of a working city that still had water commerce as part of its economic vitality. The bridges have to open and close to let traffic through. So despite all the fancy decorations of the place, it had to be a functional bridge. So they had a boat called the Herman Hetler. It was a lumber freight boat. And it was there to be the first boat to pass through. So the Herman Hetler whistles, the bells start to ring, the gates come down, the bridge starts to take its inaugural rise, but there was one small problem. There were still 4 cars on the bridge that hadn't gotten off yet. The bridge starts to rise, the cars start to slide backwards. Here's this happy occasion, could end with 4 hapless automobiles and their motorists getting dumped in the river, and what would happen? The bridge tender apparently didn't notice what was happening. However, it was noticed by members of the Chicago Police Department, who had to literally fire their revolvers to get the attention of the bridge tender and say, "Stop!" Which they did, and a sad ending for the event was averted. The idea of the design of the bridge was the transformation of this intersection on the river into an elegant European-style boulevard. And so the design is classicist, and so it looks to inspiration of architectural forms of antiquity, Beaux-Art style. It's completely the antithesis of what modernists like Louis Sullivan and Frank Lloyd Wright would want to do. But this was all about traditional forms that would exude the idea of elegance and trying to show that Chicago could stand up with the great European boulevards. Beautiful limestone bridge houses. It didn't take until the late 1920s before they were finally finished. The bridge houses were put in after the opening. And even at that, the bridge houses were built and there were these gaps that were left for the sculpture that was going to go into them. And it wasn't until almost the end of the 1920s that they could really call the bridge finished. But it is such an elegant, beautiful bridge. And it became an iconic symbol. And it was single-handedly responsible for changing North Michigan Avenue, already called Pine Street, from a kind of a lackluster, somewhat industrial street into an elegant boulevard.
The question was, in what year was the Michigan Avenue Bridge renamed the DuSable Bridge, and who was Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable? The Michigan Avenue Bridge was renamed the DuSable Bridge in 2010 after Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable, who was Chicago's first non-Native American permanent resident. DuSable was a Haitian immigrant who made his home on the north side of the Chicago River, right about where the Michigan Avenue Bridge crosses today. Now, certainly 1920 was not the first movable bridge to be built in Chicago. So your next question is, where and when was the first movable bridge built on the Chicago River? Please welcome Fifth House Ensemble.
Hi everyone, Melissa Nahn with Fifth House Ensemble. We are thrilled to have been able to partner with Friends of the Chicago River to create 3 newly commissioned musical works that explore the sounds and the history of the Chicago River. This is part of our project called Rivers Empyrean, which includes concert performances and educational and family activities. We are so sorry we weren't able to be with you in person, but we are really excited to wish Friends of the Chicago River a happy centennial, and we look forward to being back with you soon.
The question was, when and where was the first movable bridge built on the Chicago River? And the answer to that is in 1834, the first movable bridge was built on Dearborn Street. It was a wooden drawbridge that was notorious for getting stuck open, and the city actually announced its demolition, but citizens just couldn't wait for that, so they actually tore it down themselves. Our next trivia question is about the river itself. You may have heard that the river was reversed. When did that happen and why? I'm very excited to welcome our next guest for this evening, Commissioner Gia Biaggi.
Hi there, I'm Gia Biaggi, Commissioner of Chicago's Department of Transportation, and I am really delighted to be here to help celebrate the 100th anniversary of the DuSable Bridge. And thanks so much to Friends of the River for bringing us all together to talk a little bit about it. So the DuSable Bridge was built in a place that marks the early settlement of non-Indigenous people in the city of Chicago as we know it today. It's important to acknowledge that Chicago is located on the traditional homelands of the Council of Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa, as well as the Menominee, Miami, and Ho-Chunk nations. Now, originally called the Michigan Avenue Bridge, the DuSable Bridge was renamed in 2010 for Jean-Baptiste Pont DuSable, who's regarded as the first non-Indigenous permanent resident of Chicago. And the trading post he helped establish sits on the north bank of the river, which is really pretty close to where the Northeast Bridge House sits today. Now, the bridge itself is this beautiful example of the Beaux-Arts style, and it's really a feat of both urban planning and civil engineering. It's anchored by those four monumental bridge houses, and it's this Chicago-style bascule bridge. It's double-decker. It's really magnificent. Now, the bridge was born out of Burnham and Bennett's 1909 plan of Chicago. You know, at the time of its design, there was a real need for river crossings. There was a bridge at Rush Street, but it was one level and it was so full of traffic it was barely passable. So Chicago's response, well, let's build a double-decker bridge. And we did. And so the DuSable Bridge was built to carry vehicles, of course, on two levels. The upper level was intended for cars and the lower level for trucks and other delivery vehicles to serve both sides of the river. It was also the first double leaf bridge in the city, which means it's raised from both sides with two separate leaves. So for CDOT, that means we can keep one half of the bridge open while we're maintaining the other side of it. Now, if you didn't know already, we have 36 movable bascule bridges in Chicago, and they still operate throughout the river system, whether that's on the main branch, the south branch, or the Calumet. Now, the DuSable Bridge, though, it's really our flagship. Now, I encourage everyone to visit the Bridge House Museum, and you'll see how it works today, where we have a little engine that helps raise the leaf to a point, and then that massive counterweight takes over and opens up the bridge to its full span. Now, prior to our trunnion bascule bridges, we, of course, had swing bridges. And while that worked for a while, back in 1897, the Army Corps of Engineers recognized that even though the bridges were swinging open, they weren't doing it well enough or often enough to get the kinds of goods and materials that we needed to move along that river moving. And it really was going to have a negative effect on our local economy, and then that would cascade out to the nation as a whole. Now today, we have an incredible team of bridge tenders here at CDOT that manage, maintain, and finely tune these bridges. They're helping maintain this really important part of our past, but they're bringing it forward not only to the present, but to the future. So I just am so glad that we're all taking a minute to celebrate this 100th anniversary. Again, a big thanks to Friends of the River for this celebration, but also for their tireless advocacy for the entire river system, thinking about it as a whole ecology, this ecosystem that runs through our city and is part of the DNA of who we are. So thank you again, and we at CDOT are so appreciative of everyone taking a minute to celebrate this incredible achievement of urban planning and civil engineering right here in our city. Thank you.
The question was, when was the Chicago River reversed and why? And the answer is the Chicago River was reversed in 1900, and the reason is all about drinking water. Originally, the Chicago River would flow into Lake Michigan, which was and is the drinking water for Chicago. So the Chicago River at that point was extremely polluted. All kinds of industrial pollution, sewage and waste would go into the river. Pretty much everything went into the river at that point. So the solution to keep all of that out of the drinking water was to reverse the river, and the way that happened was the Sanitary and Ship Canal was built. That canal pulled water from the Chicago River the opposite direction all the way down to the Mississippi and the Gulf of Mexico, and it permanently reversed it. Your next question is about the color of the bridges. So most of the bridges in Chicago are painted using a combination of red and black paints. What is that color called? Our next guests for this evening are our friends over at the Magnificent Mile Association.
Sure. My name is Kimberly Bears, and I'm the president and CEO of the Magnificent Mile Association. Well, the Magnificent Mile Association was created 112 years ago. It was then called the North Central Business District Association, and it was largely developed in response to the bridge. So the bridge was this integral part of Daniel Burnham's plan for Chicago in 1909. And the bridge transformed Pine Street, which at the time was this single lane dirt road. And with the building of the bridge, Michigan Avenue in its wonderful boulevard design was built. And so both the bridge and the Magnificent Mile Association share a lot of history together.
How did the opening of the bridge change business at that point?
It completely transformed it. Again, going to it being a one-lane dirt road. I mean, it's hard to even see that in one's eye compared to what it is today. But it really set the stage for the development, for the architecture and the buildings, the iconic and aesthetic feel that the boulevard has today. All of that was made possible with the bridge.
Where's the Magnificent Mile Association at today, and how do you intend to celebrate this?
Well, it is a momentous occasion, and like everyone in a COVID-19 world, we're adapting. So instead of doing an in-person celebration that involves hundreds or thousands of people, we've taken it online, and we'll be releasing a video that commemorates the 100th anniversary on May 14th, 2020. And we're really pleased and proud that we've gotten so many of our partners, including you, Josh, and the Bridge House Museum. We'll have an introductory or a welcoming statement from the mayor, and hopefully some other fine folks to help us celebrate that 100th anniversary.
Your last question was, what is the color of most of the bridges in Chicago? And the answer is, it is called Old Bordeaux, which is a mixture of red and black paints. Our next question for bridge trivia tonight is, who actually operates these bridges? Why are they operated, and how many times a year? Our next guest for this evening is an author, he's a historian, and he is an all-around expert on pretty much all of Chicago River's bridges because he wrote the book on them. Please welcome Patrick McBriarty.
Hello, I'm Patrick McBriarty. I am the author of the book Chicago River Bridges. The bridge itself is a double-leaf, double-deck bascule bridge, and it is actually two bridges that are side by side one another. And if you actually go down to the Riverwalk and look from the south to the north, you can see that the bridge itself is split right down the middle. And the bridge itself was a huge boon to the city. It replaced 4 previous swing bridges at Rush Street. And this bridge then is a Chicago type bascule bridge. And bascule is a French word meaning seesaw or teeter-totter, usually implying the use of a counterweight. And that idea, that design goes back to probably at least medieval times for castle keeps or drawbridges over a moat. So the bridge itself at Michigan Avenue is a double leaf bridge, so that it has It has center locks in the middle. There are also heel locks on each end because it's such a heavy and large bridge. Those are released, and then the bridge itself rotates on a trunnion, which is basically like a large cylinder on the side of each portion of the bridge, and that is then held by a bearing and then goes supported by the foundations. Around the back side of that on each approach is a counterweight pit that allows then the back end with the counterweight to drop down into the counterweight pit to allow it to open as high as about 76 degrees or so. That is run by electric motors that are, I believe, 108 horsepower that then turn a series of reducing gears to then drive what's called a pinion gear or drive gear that meshes with this curve on the back inside of the bridge, which is called a rack. And those laddered steps mesh with each of the teeth of the gear, and then that drives the back end of the bridge down so that it would raise to allow ships to go through the riverway. The Michigan Avenue Bridge also, when it was first built in 1920, as I said, was the first bridge to greet ships coming in and out of the Chicago harbor. And then later, Lakeshore Drive was added further east in 1937, and then Columbus Drive in 1982. And those also are bascule bridges. There was another interesting incident in 1922, just a couple of years after it opened, when the bridge was actually jumped. There was a gentleman by the name of Vincent Drusi. He was known as Vincent the Schemer. He was a known safe cracker, and he was part of the Dion O'Banion gang on the north side of Chicago. Apparently, he was being tailed by a couple of police detectives. He was in a car and decided as the bridge was about to open and be lifted that he would elude the detectives by crashing through the gates, running up the incline of the bridge as it was being opened, jumping the gap 50 feet above the water, and then landing safely on the other side. Now, the two detectives, Tui and Klasko, not to be outdone, who were following him, also followed him, racing up this increasing incline of the bridge deck to jump an even wider gap. And then Darushi gets stuck in traffic, tries to flee on foot, and is arrested. So as I like to say, that in Chicago, it doesn't pay to jump a bridge unless it's for a movie.
The question was, who actually operates these bridges? How do they do it? And how many times a year does it happen? Well, the Chicago Department of Transportation is in charge of all bridge operations. And the way they do it is they have two teams that actually leapfrog from bridge to bridge, opening and closing them. So as one bridge is going up, the next team is getting the bridge downstream ready for lift. The bridges used to be lifted thousands of times a year, but nowadays they're only lifted a few dozen for the sailboats or the tall ships that are going out to the Great Lakes in the spring, spending all summer, and then in the fall they all come back downstream to harbor for the winter. Most of you probably know by now that the DuSable Bridge is a bascule trunnion bridge. However, there are three other different types of movable bridges that can be found on the Chicago River, the Calumet, and in the Sanitary and Ship Canal. What are those three types of bridges? Please welcome our next guest, Mijay Gula.
Thanks, Josh, for inviting Tenderhouse Project to celebrate this momentous event of our river's history. My name is Mijay Gula. I'm the founder of Tenderhouse Project. Our sole mission has been to creatively activate Chicago's underutilized bridge houses. Not only do we see them as relics of our river's industrial past, but we also see the potential for these houses to be cultural and community assets along our river. For over 3 years, we've been in collaboration with local artists and organizations to explore the creative capacity of Chicago's 70 bridge houses. On the 100th anniversary of the Michigan Avenue Bridge, we're happy to share one of these activations with you. Bridge Lift was a magical event that took place in the fall of last year, where Chicago artist Ben Lamar Gay performed a duet with the Michigan Avenue Bridge during one of its scheduled bridge lifts. This live performance was amplified from the bridge house windows and engaged Chicagoans on each side of the river and boats in the water. I hope you enjoy.
The question was, what are the other 3 types of bridges that can be found in this region? And the answer is a center pier swing bridge, which rotates along a center pier that's actually in the water, a Scherzer rolling lift bridge, which has the counterweight above ground, and a vertical lift bridge, which mostly can be found on the Calumet and also most notably in Chinatown. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. It was a very special date that we just could not miss, no matter what the circumstances outside. So thank you so much to everyone that viewed this, to all of our guests, and once the museum opens for this season, we really hope that you can come visit us in person. So thank you so much and have a great evening.
Here's to 100 years of history.